A long time ago, when musicians decided to use lines and spaces as a way to show us which keys to play on a piano, they thought we probably needed about 11 lines for notes. They put some notes on top of those lines and inside those spaces between the lines, but it was really hard to tell which line or space was being used. So, they decided to take out that middle line. In order to write the note that belonged on that line, they just drew a little line for that note and called that little line a ledger line. That note stood for the C that is almost in the middle of the piano keyboard. But the reason they called it middle C was because it was right in the middle of the two sets of lines and spaces. However, it was still hard to read with those two sets of lines and spaces that were so close together. So then they made the space in between the two sets of lines and spaces bigger. All of a sudden, middle C could not be written in the middle, or the line would be way too far away from the other lines and spaces. So middle C had to be written two different ways. It is the little line drawn below the top set of lines and spaces, and it is the little line drawn above the lower set of lines and spaces. These two notes don't look like the original middle C, but they both still have that name. If you go to a piano and put your right-hand thumb on the middle C piano key, and go up one white key for each of your fingers, you land on the G key. You started on a line note, went to a space note, then a line note again, then another space note, then a line note, the second line. That G note then sits on top of that line, too. Cursive letters are when the letters are written so they hook together. People tend to sign their name in cursive. This is how a cursive G looks. This G was written on top of those lines and spaces to show that the note on the line inside that lower loop of the G was that second line, that line for the G note. You can see here that the cursive G is backwards. Over time, this funny-looking G was changed into the symbol we see now. This is called the treble clef, and is also called the G clef. The line for the G note sits inside that lower curve. I like the way the treble clef looks a lot better than a backwards G. Now if you put your left-hand thumb on the middle C key and go down one white key with each of your fingers like we did with the right hand, you will land on an F with your little finger. So the note for that key sits on top of line 4. This squiggly shape is the way cursive Fs were made a long time ago. That last little part that went over line 4 showed where the F note belonged. That cursive F shape also turned into a new symbol. This is called the bass clef and is also called the F clef. The F note sits on top of that line that is between those two dots. Those two dots make it really easy to know where the F note goes. So now we know how to write middle C two different ways, and know that top shape is called a treble clef or a G clef because it shows us where the first G note above middle C belongs. And that bottom shape is called the bass clef or F clef because it shows us where the first F note below middle C belongs. When we read music, and by reading music, we mean using those lines and spaces and notes to find out where to play on the piano. There is a brace that connects those two sets of lines and spaces. It reminds us to look at both sets of lines and spaces when we are reading the music. The set of lines and spaces with the treble clef at the beginning is called the treble staff. And those notes are played most of the time with our right hand because they show us the notes for the keys on the right end of the piano keyboard. The set of lines and spaces with the bass clef at the beginning is called the bass staff, and those notes are played most of the time with our left hand because they show us the notes for the keys on the left end of the piano keyboard. The treble staff and the bass staff together is called the grand staff. I just gave you a lot of information and some new words. We will keep using the words so you will remember them. Bye.